Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain today. We are working on a kind of an experimental project and thought we'd take you along and show you what we're trying to do with, well, vegetative residue waste that gets generated in the hoop house. So let's take a look and see how we're working it out. Okay, so one of the things that we always have a trouble with is every year, particularly for perennials or soft perennial things in our hoop house, like our mums and our Dusty Miller, and to another degree, we also raise scented geranium in a hoop house. These things need to be cut back at the end of the season, usually late fall, and it creates a lot of biomass to deal with. And it's semi-woody in a case of like mums, in a case of Dusty Miller. So what we've been trying to do, instead of hauling it all out and putting it into large compost piles and taking a large amount of time basically for it to break down, is we're experimenting with the idea of kind of a chop and drop and mulch in place in the pathways in between the actual beds in our hoop house. And so that's what I thought I'd bring you along today and show you kind of what we've done. What this side here, when you look at what we've got, this is about 3 weeks ago, right around, this is the first week in January, so it was right around the first week, I guess it's been a month now, actually, first week of December. We cut down our mums, and it created quite a bit of biomass. These mums were about 5 foot tall, most of them. And what we did is we came in with electric hedge shears and basically chopped them down to the ground level. As you can see, they're already starting to do some sprouting for next year. And they look a little bit, you know, kind of beat up at this point, but they're actually in pretty good shape. We've got a lot of them in here that are a little bit still waiting to put some sprouts out. And we took all that biomass that we cut off, and what we did is we just went through with the electric hedge trimmer and we chopped it and we left it in place in the row itself. And then after we got it all chopped down, we came through and we wetted it down. We just basically brought in a hose with a lot of water and just kind of wetted things down and walking on it. And we've also applied already a couple doses of extract of compost tea with a lot of fungal stuff in it to help the rotting process and get this basically down in place. And you can see when you look at the pathway itself, let me stand up here. When you look down the pathway itself, most of this stuff now is maybe an inch to a little more than an inch thick in the pathway itself. And it's becoming almost like a woody mulch. And when you walk on it, it has the consistency of almost like a wood chip mulch. Or walking on it, it's pretty soft. So the material is decomposing as we go. And this, as I said, is 4 weeks at this point. So what we're going to do today is we're going to put another dose on this side, and the other side, which we just chopped last week, the Dusty Miller, is still quite a bit. You can see it's still really fluffy, but it's now at about probably 2 to 2.5 inches deep at this point. And we're going to apply compost extract tea on that as well. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're trying to inoculate this vegetative stuff and just kind of jumpstart it during this time of the year when soil moisture levels are pretty good and we can keep some moisture on top of it, that we can get the rotting process done, most of it decomposed in place. Now, what folks may wonder is, well, why are you going through all that effort? Because our thought is on this is as the easy leafy stuff decomposes, what's going to be left is a little bit longer term stuff. The chopped sticks and things of that nature are going to almost form what we're hoping is kind of like the same effect of a wood chip base. Since we don't have access to that many wood chips, we have some on the property that we've gotten from a project we did before, but getting wood chips for us is kind of a difficult unless we pay for it, which can be very expensive. So we're trying to use this with the same concept of getting it to the point where we're actually using it as a weed suppression barrier in the pathways, so we don't have to come through and weed once the season begins growing. If it gets too much, if we get to the point where the material is rotted down quite well, we always have the option of using it as a compost back on the actual beds we took it off of. But my feeling on it is, at least for the first couple of years, we're going to see this material really decompose fast into the soil itself. Worked itself down quite a bit in just 4 weeks. So we anticipate with this last dosing of compost extract, this will be the second, so we've only done it twice, the second time on this, that it'll probably take care of the vast majority of what's left. And as long as we keep enough moisture on the path, not sopping wet, you know, to the point where you've got standing water, but just keeping it wet to the point where it's like 50–60% moisture, this material will just quickly degrade. Okay, in order to get biology into, you know, the row to help decompose the material, I mean, there's a couple of different ways you can go. You can just say, well, why don't you just spread some compost over the top of it and water it in? Part of the reason behind that is because that will actually add more biomass in there, and that's kind of not what we're looking for at this point. We're looking for the idea is if you don't have a ton of compost, what is the most effective way to get your compost stretched? And one of the ways to do it is to make an extract. And so this is an old pile. We've taken most of the material off, and we're kind of down to the point where what's left here is some woody material that isn't completely decomposed. But the material itself, this pile had been sitting here for over 6 months before we used the material. And so now what we've got is kind of down to an interface of what's left. There's some poorly rotted material on the top, but there's a lot of, when you get down to what we want to go for is we're trying to get down to the interface between where the pile stops and the soil underneath it begins. That 1/2 inch to 1 inch of that soil / compost mixture is chocked full of biology. And that's what we're going for, is to take that biology and make an extract of it. So what we're going to need to do to make, as an example, what we're going to do is we're going to make a 4-gallon pail of extract, which then when we apply it to the row, it's 4 gallons for the entire row. And so, but you could even dilute it further if you really wanted to, but we're going to put it on pretty strong, so we're going to put on the full 4 gallons. And then we're going to water it in. But the material that we're going to use as a basis to get this is right here. And it's called, you know, it's just that first inch or so. You don't need woody materials, but it's got tons of biologic life in it. And we're going to take enough off of this pile, and then we have another pile that was actually older that sat for almost a year before we used it, and we'll take some of the material off of that one too. So a couple scoops out of this one, and we'll go over to the other pile, the older pile, and take some of that. Let's go do that. Okay, this pile's been sitting here for about a year, and it still has well, a little bit of organic material left on it, but it's even got some worms and stuff. We don't need to take the worms, so that must mean, oh, I'm landscape fabric that I accidentally dug up. But the whole idea is we're taking, you know, that interface again, where there's lots of good stuff in here. This particular amount is pretty wet because it's been exposed to the rain, but it's still got lots of good stuff in it. So we're just trying to get enough that we can mix up and fill a bag that we can then extract the material out of. One last thing we're going to put in this is some decomposing wood chips, some of the fungi from that. We'd like to get some of the spores and things that might be available in that, so we're going to add some of the rotting wood chips in this too. So let's go get those. Okay, this is a pile of wood chips we got from when we removed some trees in the front of our property. These chips have been sitting here for a couple of years and aging, and as you can see, there are some parts of it that have tons of saprophytic fungi in it. I mean, this is really bound together pretty well with it. And what we're going to do is take a bunch of that because it's probably got some spores in it as well. And the idea is we're going to be trying to knock that material into the compost extract as well. So this should help, you know, work on things that are maybe a little more woody. And that's about all we need. We don't need a ton of it. We're just trying to get enough to get an inoculant going. So now let's go make the extract. Okay, here's the material. We're just going to mix it up. Now, if you're squeamish about muddy stuff and critters and all that kind of stuff, I suppose you can wear gloves, but, you know, kind of like I getting to the point where now it's all good. So the idea is we're just trying to kind of bust this up and get it mixed up evenly. And we're going to take the material, and what we're doing is we're using an old bulb bag that we got daffodils in years ago, and it's just a mesh nylon bag. Not really super fine mesh, but just kind of a basic one to keep the big stuff from getting into the water. And we'll just take as much as we can here. That fills it up about, oh, probably a third of the way, which is pretty good. Alright, we're just going to start spraying water on it. And the idea is we're trying to knock the material, as many of the fines as possible from the compost mixture into the solution. Of it in here, and the material looks just like coffee. Okay, this is called a compost extract. So what we did is we just used the force of the water to extract as much of the stuff off of the solids from the bottom of the compost pile as possible. So there is a ton of all kinds of things in here: fungi spores, bacterias, actinomycetes, all kinds of life in here. You can apply this direct, which is what we're going to do on each row because we want to give it a really strong dose, but you can also use this in a diluted form. You could cut it down to 1 part of this to 30 parts of water and use it as a drench. You don't want it to sit around. Okay, to spread this out, it's really kind of simple. We're just going to kind of go a little bit. We don't need to put a lot in any one spot. The idea is when you're trying to drench, you're just trying to get a little bit into the soil. Because what we're doing is we're inoculating. Okay, we finished that side over there. We just kind of didn't show you the last part of it, but that side's been now inoculated. Now we're going to do the same thing to this side. This is another batch of it. And so we're just going to, same idea. We just want to get enough, a little bit on top, because the whole point is this is an inoculant. Okay, I kind of stopped wetting things down, but you can kind of get the point of what we're trying to do. Is we're not, you know, in the idea is that we're trying to just massively soak this thing down. We're just trying to wash the inoculant that we laid down below the surface into the layer of the material that's just right below the surface, and keep the moisture level in here at about 60 to 50 to 60%. And that seems to be what's doing a really good job of taking this material down, which I said this one's a month old, and this one has been cut off now about a week and a half or so. I'm not sure the exact timing on it, but it's at least half as long as this side over here. And so some questions might come up, and people say, well, yeah, man, you're putting all this organic material down and you're keeping it wet. This is just going to end up being a home for slugs, or a great place for voles to hide, or mice or other rodents. And I'd say that is a risk that that is really possible. But a couple things that are unique to us here that we're doing differently. We have not chased off any biology in here in terms of, we have snakes in here, garter snakes. We have cats that actually...
That was not a garter snake.
Huh?
That wasn't a garter snake.
Oh, no, that one wasn't. That one was, but we do have garter snakes in here, but that one was, I think it was a, what do they call it, a bull snake.
Yeah.
And he was just a little guy. He wasn't very big.
He was scary.
But, so they're in here and they're working. They have their places now. It's warm enough in here for them that they're still active, which is okay. They'll eat slug eggs. They'll eat, small voles, small rodent nests. They'll get into them and they'll take care of them on that. Then on top of that, we have a couple of cats. We have 8 cats on the property here.
And maybe a 9th.
And maybe a 9th who's just visiting. I think he's on an exchange program. And we usually, every day I come in here to these tunnels, there's 1 or 2 cats that are just, they're spending time in here and they're watching things and they're working things. And I've seen them.
They're leaving presents.
They're leaving presents for us.
Voles.
Voles or mice or what like that. And so we've seen very little damage so far that this has been down, either from slugs or from voles itself. So.
And the cats aren't really doing a lot of damage. They did in one tunnel playing with the frost blanket, but
yeah,
for the most part they're just working the food.
Yeah, they're being good hunters, and so far that I think that's been a really good thing. And you can see that the mums are starting to come back. We have not composted this row yet. That's the next thing we're going to have to do here, is bring in some urban compost.
Isn't it a little early for the mums?
Well, we are
way warmer.
We're just running warmer this year. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, today is January 8th, and we are probably 50 degrees outside.
It's warm in the tunnel.
And the tunnel in here, since it's a sunny day today, we are easily 65, 70, maybe even better.
Nah, you wouldn't be wearing all that, would you?
Well, if it was 80, I'd be taking it off. But it's pretty warm in here. And so light levels are beginning to come up, and so we're getting things, some things are moving ahead. Definitely moving ahead. So anyway, that's kind of the experiment we're working on. We're working on to see if this good stuff with an inoculant on it can decompose quickly enough that it's out of the way, doesn't cause any problems with slugs or other places for critters to hide. Keep the biology active in here with enough moisture, and the stuff will basically decompose into a nice mulch in the pathways, with the objective being that when spring does hit in here, it's not another job we have to do in terms of maintaining weed-free pathways. So that's kind of the idea. And the nutrients themselves from the decomposing materials will eventually leach back probably into the root zones of the adjoining plants in the beds, so it's probably got some benefits there too as well.
It's not real pretty though.
No, it's not pretty,
but it is
and I'm not sure that
back saving.
I'm not sure that it'll work in all circumstances. So we're only trying this with the soft perennial type refuse, things that have a little bit more woodiness to them. Not really sold on the idea that maybe it's going to be useful in a tunnel that grows a lot of annuals and things, particularly a tunnel that has high turnover. Since this tunnel doesn't really have high turnover, meaning that it's going to have multiple crops in it, these are kind of like crops that are in here for the season itself. So kind of thinking that probably is maybe also a judgment as to whether you would do this technique with something where you've got multiple different crops coming out at different times, maybe not a full bed of something, and you just got all kinds of different dynamics there. And I think I want to do this for a while just to see if it does eventually cause any problems or it really just works out great. Either way, I put in a fraction of the labor that I needed to cut the stuff out and haul it out, pile it up.
Backs.
And then once you put it into a compost pile, you're almost obligated to turn it at least once or twice. And so it was a lot easier to do from that perspective, and it was pretty fast too.
Just a few other things that you might want to ask is, how many years have these mums been here?
This is the 5th year for these guys here, and
no, 6th
or maybe 6th. Yeah, I think.
I think it's 6.
I think you're right, because I'm thinking 2014, 15. Yeah, we put them in 2015. They're all from King's Mums, varieties that are common. We just try to get a good variety of things. The trick about mums is, for us in our zone, is they're a bit of a crapshoot because most of them mature in October, November. And if you're lucky and you're warm enough and you don't get a frost, you can get some pretty good harvests out of them. Unfortunately, the last several years, we have had a difficult time with getting nailed with frosts, usually in late October.
But we don't lose the plants very often. The plants are, fairly hardy, but they're in here in a tunnel.
Yeah, and some of the plants we'll look at and say, well, they're just getting to the point where they're getting too old and too woody, and we'll take cuttings off of them and redo them.
And then the Dusty Miller?
The Dusty Miller, this is its last year on it. We usually do about 3 years on a rotation, and so we cut it back down to the way it is now. We got a little bit of cleanup work to do in this front end of it, and then apply a mulch on that too as well, of some urban compost. And after, probably what we're talking about is after the summertime harvest off of this bed, it'll be removed and we'll go to something else, like we may rotate tulips in there next year or something like that.
And the tulips behind you are an annual crop.
Right. Tulips for us are an annual crop, and once they're done, then we'll rotate into sunflowers. We have some early sunflowers, Premier series that mature in a tunnel really well, so you can get sunflowers growing by May. You get some blooms. They're not super tall and they work out really good. And then we'll rotate in something else after the sunflowers, depending on where we are and space. It could be anything from celosia to ornamental basils or something. Kales, or fall kales. That's another possibility too. So this is kind of it. It's mostly in here, not a lot of rotations, and so what we're going to try to do is just see if this whole idea works. So we'll check back in probably, well, let's check back, say, right around the end of February. That'll give it a good 2 months, and we'll see, how the stuff rotted down. So we'll do another follow-up video then. So thanks for watching today. Might have been a little long. Sorry about that, but we just thought we'd want to show you an experiment we're working on that maybe would take out another step of extra labor. So hope you all have a good day. Thanks for watching, and be safe out there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.